Good evening, friends. All right. Good evening, Metal Man. All right. Everybody hear me okay? The audio, everything sounds good. All right. Hear you great. Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right. Okay. Escaped Sync said, Father Moses, you got me interested in Orthodox and Roman Catholic. Can I come visit you? I mean, sure. Everybody knows where the church is. Church is in Georgetown, Texas. It's open to whoever. It's Sunday morning, 9:30 a.m. Feel free to come by for liturgy. I don't do a lot of after liturgy on Sunday. We do Q&A, so you can stay around for the Q&A and ask me any questions that you want and have lunch with us. Jack Greenwood went to my first liturgy a week and a half ago in Orthos today. Currently going to a Baptist church for the last 2 years. Congratulations, Jack. Welcome home. Possibly becoming Catholic. All right. Well, Metal Man, that doesn't really have anything to do with us. We're Orthodox. Yeshua's Lord. Should one be received by baptism in chrismation if his baptism wasn't done in triple immersion? Absolutely. I mean, that's the teaching of the church. The historical teaching of the church was always to do a full immersion baptism that followed the prescription of the church fathers. So, yeah. I Father's name Uriel as one of the seven archangels venerated on the Synaxis, fully but permitted. Yes, absolutely, Joseph. But the thing is, if your given name is Joseph, then the best thing to do is to go by Joseph. I mean, that's just the best. Our Archbishop Peter was adamant about that. Ocean says, thank you, Father, for the videos. Absolutely, man. It's my joy. Eddie Liff said, how does one find the right church? Do I just Google it? Yeah, Eddie, that's probably the best way. I typically recommend people um, look for the local Russian Orthodox Church. That's obviously what I'm part of. That's what I recommend. So, yeah. Love the fasting content. How I ended up here, still love the content. All right. Escape Sync said, can a married man become a priest after converting to Orthodoxy? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's so the Orthodox tradition is that you have to, whatever state that you're ordained is the state that you remain in. So if you're single and you get ordained, you have to remain single and celibate. But if you're married, you absolutely get ordained and remain married. The one caveat being that you don't um, remarry if you're a priest. Give me 1 second. I'm going to just adjust my camera. All right. There we go. I don't know what this is. There is a hair on your screen. It says Greek Orthodox here. How is Russian Orthodox different from the rest of the Eastern Orthodox Church? Well, it's not really different. I would just say that there's currently in the church, there's kind of what we would consider to be more traditional. Obviously, more traditional parishes tend to be Russian Orthodox, Serbian, Romanians a lot of times, just meaning that the expectations within the church for fasting, for prayer, preparation for the sacraments, is more according to what the church has historically done. That's the big thing in terms of on the parish level. That's on the parish level. Father Moses Luke McSween said, I am a 17-year-old. Me and my girlfriend want to become Orthodox. What are the basics you recommend getting started? Reading a basic history of the church, like the Orthodox Church by Metropolitan Kallistos Ware, is a good starting point. If you're coming from a Protestant background, Rock and Sand by Father Josiah Trenum. And then, meeting with the priest and just start attending the liturgy. Kind of going to church is a lot of kind of monkey see, monkey do. You see what other people do, and then you follow what they're doing. So I recommend absolutely getting into the parish. That's the only way to really become Orthodox. Yeah. So Jake said, can you do a video or breakdown on what someone new to an Orthodox church first time could expect the experience to be like coming from a more evangelical type of church? Yeah, we're going to put together a church etiquette video. So God willing, we come out with that pretty soon, and you're able to check that out. Sundance says, Father, you had one more rep. Sundance was lifting with us tonight. We had a good workout. It was a good workout, and I did have one more rep, but I pushed myself really hard on incline bench. So we did incline bench. We did 330 on incline for a set of 8, and then for a set of 11, and I did not have the 12th rep. And then my shoulder and pec isn't feeling great. So then we did flat bench afterwards, which is what the routine called the program that we're running right now by Swede Burns, and worked up to 375 for 8 reps. So probably had a 9th, and if I was fresh, probably had 10 or 11 at 375. So good session. Hit a P. I think that's a PR for me. I have to check, but I want to say that's a PR. Let's double check. Let's see. What do we got in terms of records? Yeah, that was a PR. That was a PR. So good. That was good tonight. Thank you, Sundance, for the super chat. Kakashi, I don't know. Oh, can an Orthodox Christian go to confession with a Catholic priest and vice versa? Absolutely not. So the Orthodox understanding that only those who have apostolic succession are able to perform the sacrament of confession. Roman Catholics, Coptics, Protestants, they don't have apostolic succession. They're non-canonical. They don't have valid sacraments. So the position of the Orthodox Church is that they cannot go to confession. And the question was vice versa. Obviously, somebody who is not in the church or baptized into the Orthodox Church can't come to confession. Can someone come to an Orthodox parish and talk to the priest about their life, their sins, the things that they're struggling with, get direction, get help, spend time with the priest? Absolutely. I mean, I field a lot of those phone calls and visits from people. So we do that all the time. But yeah, it's not actually a it's not a confession because the priest is not reading the prayer of absolution over the person. So yeah. Cordfed Aztec said the gym and Christianity content, I believe, goes hand in hand. How can you be for spiritual or physical if the other lacks? Yeah, it's not so much that you have to be physically. I mean, again, I draw a big distinction in the things that I talk about, which are a lot of times people are reading monastic material that is written for monastics. They're not reading things that are actually written for lay people. So the life of a layman living in the world or doing hard labor or protecting your family, providing for your family, all the things that go along with that is very different than the ascetical tradition of the church. St. Paisios, other saints talk about this. In traditional Orthodox countries, obviously there's not, it's normative for men who are married to be more physically fit, and it's normal for monks to be leaner from fasting and dietary restrictions. I mean, that's just normal. Their life, their way of life, mode of life is different. So the aesthetic or the goal in the married life is to be physically fit for your family, able to tackle a full day's worth of work, get things done, all of that other stuff. Obviously, monks do that, but to a limited degree. So their expectations are very different than ours. Jeremy said, "Hey, Father, I've been looking into orthodoxy. A question I have is how can the saints hear multiple people asking for intercession, and where can we find this in Scripture?" So, how can the saints do that? I mean, the saints are in paradise with God, so they obviously have abilities that we don't have. It's not like if 10 people are talking to them at the same time in the same room and you're not able to process it. Obviously, saints have abilities because they are because they're with Christ. So there's nothing lacking in the saints. Where can we see this in Scripture? Well, one of the things that we have to understand about Scripture is we see a lot of the groundwork for the church, but things like apostolic succession and the way that it was actually written out by the church fathers was basically building on what had been explained to them by the apostles. So we see the groundwork for hearing confession in the Gospels, where Christ gives the apostles power to bind and loose sins. But that doesn't mean that that Christ gave that power to everybody, right? And so this is a much later interpretation. It was very clearly understood by the church fathers. Again, things like the Eucharist, when we look at the writings of the church fathers, all of the church fathers are in agreement. So one of the things that we talk about when we look at the saints is like the book of Revelation, where we see the saints interceding before the throne of God in the worship in the heavenly kingdom. These sort of things, the fact that Moses and Elijah appear with Christ on Mount Tabor. So obviously, this is not an issue in any way. Death to Compromise says you were wrong about the true Orthodox Christians. This is kind of like anything. If you have to write true next beside it, it's like saying this is a true, uh, this is a true Rolex, genuine Rolex. There's something questionable. So those who have gone into schism in the old calendarist movement, you know, uh, you could ask the bishops what they think about that. Uh, Michael says, "What is your gauge for seeing the beginning of theosis in somebody?" I don't know if there's a gauge. Love of enemies. Saint Silouan says that love of enemies. Nick says, due to Orthodoxy, we're trying to decide between Eastern or Oriental Orthodox. I mean, we covered some of this in a previous stream. There's absolutely there's no question. I mean, the truth of the church, of the Orthodox Church, the fullness of the saints, the fact that it hasn't deviated from what the apostolic teaching is, that the Oriental Orthodox condemned the saints of the Orthodox Church. You have to understand that this is not a small agreement. I was very grateful. There was, I believe, an Oriental priest who commented on my last Q&A and said that the position of the Oriental Orthodox is exactly the same as the Eastern Orthodox, which is they do not view us as being an apostolic succession, right? They condemn our saints and they canonize their heretics. So, what I would say is read the lives of the Orthodox saints, St. Paisius. I mean, they're just countless. I mean, the Orthodox Church produces real saints. I mean, read all those modern saints and holy elders. That's where I'd always start and encourage anybody to do. I don't know this. Thema P to Hope. Father, please illuminate what self-care and compassion look like according to the faith and how that interplays with our call to self-sacrifice. Well, I mean, one of the primary things is that we're not healthy just unto ourselves. I mean, we talked about that in the recent gym video, which is it's all about building aesthetics. It's not actually about putting in hard work. It's not actually about taking care of other people around you. So for men, the primary reason for good health is to be able to protect and provide and lead by example in their family. When men don't do this, they end up losing the respect. The reality is that they typically lose the respect of their wife and of their children. This doesn't mean that it's an end in itself. Just because a man is physically fit doesn't mean that he's going to be uh, how do we want to put it? A great man or a holy man. It's always the combination of the two. It just so happens that my channel focuses on the need with spiritual life to cultivate physical health as well. And then for women, it's very self-evident. You have to take care of your children. You have to be able to have, God willing, you're blessed with having children and with babies, and being physically fit helps with pregnancy, with stress, with being able to physically take care of your children. If a situation arises, you may even have to protect them to some degree. So all of these things are, when we talk about physical fitness, it's always in relationship to other people. It's not just a goal or an end in itself. It does have some benefits, obviously, for mental health. There's been numerous studies that show that in a placebo trial between, or not on a placebo trial, but in a trial between antidepressants and exercise, basically the results were the same, that the people who did physical fitness responded tremendously and their mental health improved dramatically. So if you can do something, it's like blood pressure medication. Some people have abnormal blood pressure and there's a genetic cause to it, but most of the people who have high blood pressure is a result of poor dietary and life choices. So if somebody is struggling with it, simply taking the medication is not, it may be a temporary solution, but we always want to get to the root of an illness and actually find a long-term solution. So that self-sacrifice is keeping yourself healthy for the people around you. So yeah, I'll switch back to the live chat. If there's any more super chats, I'll go over. Yeah. Sublimating Psyche says, hello, my life has become quite turbulent and I've recently experienced a lot of disillusionment with the Roman Catholic Church in the past. How might I more fruitfully rekindle my relationship with God? I interact so frequently with former Catholics, and the reality is that there's, a tremendous amount of psychological baggage, I would say, that comes with being Roman Catholic. So the pressure that's put on them, the view of God, the disillusionment. I talk about it in a recent video. It's something that I see repeated over and over again. So as much as people are like, oh well, maybe these aren't all theological points, they're very much practical points of how I see people really, honestly, consistently damaged by the Roman Catholic Church. It is pretty much every person that I encounter that comes from a Roman Catholic background has tremendous amounts of guilt and shame, and a lot of times self-loathing. They don't have a warmth towards Christ. They have a kind of neurotic fear of God. So when I encounter that sort of stuff, and it's so consistent, at some point you say, hey, this is one of the hallmarks of Roman Catholicism, this kind of psychological state that people find themselves in. So if somebody wants to, fruitfully approach or rekindle their relationship with God, I would tell them, come to the Orthodox Church. I just know so many Roman Catholics who have been burned out that, my strong encouragement, obviously, for a variety of reasons, but one of which is going to be to experience orthodoxy and that very loving and tender view that we have of God, and that God is the lover of mankind, that he's here to save us, that he has mercy on us, that he cherishes us as children, because I don't see the psychological damage within the Orthodox Church. And, and even within Roman Catholicism, people don't have spiritual fathers in the way that we have them in the Orthodox Church. It's much, much more profound in Orthodoxy. So that's what I would recommend. Mitch and Christina, thank you guys for the super chat, and thanks Sundance and Thema to Hope for the super chats. Um, If our only options are Greek, Antiochian, or OCA, would you recommend one way or the other? And if so, why? Thanks, Father. It really depends on the parishes near you. I would say I would probably. It's hard to say. Check out the Antiochian, the OCA churches for sure. I would meet the priest. I would talk to him about being received by baptism and the importance of that. The caveat being I do feel strongly, and this is the position of ROCOR, which I am a part of, which is that we receive all priests or we receive all people by baptism. So this is something that the saints, our modern day saints, have talked about. This is the position of Mount Athos. This is the position of ROCOR. So, I would encourage people to find a parish where they're able to be received by baptism. And that's, is typically not a possibility in certain jurisdictions. So I would recommend checking out the OCA parish for that reason and meet with the priest and talk with him and just ask him, what's his view of the saints and modern day orthodoxy and begin to get a sense about being received into the church because that's the ultimate goal within becoming Orthodox, obviously to become spiritually healthy, but on the journey to spiritual health to be received by baptism. Autistic Spider. Hello, Father Moses. I have autism. It was wondering what is the Eastern Orthodox stance on autism and would I be able to become a priest or monk? It's very hard to say. Obviously, I don't know you. So I can't say definitively. And obviously, autism is a spectrum. So there are people who have very strong manifestations of autism. They're not able to read social cues. They have a difficult time conversing with people and connecting with them. You have to understand the priesthood, and we talked about this recently in our interview with Father John Whiteford, is all about loving people. So there are people who become priests who are predominantly academic. They have a very cerebral outlook on the church. They focus a lot on theology and study, and they don't realize that for the average person, raising a family, practical life questions, developing the life of prayer, having addictions, receiving the sacraments, that's primarily the job of a parish priest. It's not just to kind of hold yourself up and read, deep theological books and then serve liturgy. It's about service to other people. So if somebody was lacking a lot of formation when it comes to their interpersonal dynamics, I would say, hey, being a parish priest is not going to be wonderful for you. And it's probably not going to be wonderful for the people because they need a very fatherly figure. Now, you have great people skills, you have, some of the, minor isms. That's the point where you need to really talk to your spiritual father and ask him, hey, do you see me becoming a priest? Because the ultimate person that you want to talk to about the priesthood is going to be your own parish priest, and it's the question, could you see me as a priest? If the priest can't see you as a priest, then understand he's saying that from a very strong background of interacting with people. And one of the first things that if I'm considering somebody for seminary or even for ordination, and the first person I always ask is my wife. Could you see this person as a priest? Because she doesn't know them in the way that I know them. I may know them as a spiritual child. I know their spiritual life and whatever else. But in some ways, she probably sees them more through the lens of the parishioners. And that's very important. The people around you really have to see you being in a priestly role. But certainly becoming a monastic is the door would not be closed on something like that. There's kind of an old joke that a lot of the rubrics within the church, which are the church services and the way the services are performed, are written by monastics. And there's a strong possibility that a lot of them actually had some autism. Ozzy Inquirer, thank you for the super chat. Hello, Father. I'm new to the Orthodox faith. I was wondering if you can recommend any book resources specifically on iconography and intercession. God bless. I can't think of anything off the top of my head that specifically refers to iconography. That's a great question. I think it's on the Holy Images. Hold on, by on the Divine Images. Three apologies against those who attack the divine image. So three treatises on the divine image by uh it's Saint, I think it's who is it? I just had it on the tip of my tongue. Saint John of Damascus. I knew that. Okay. So that's what I would recommend on the divine images. I'm gonna throw it in the chat. So if you want, you can check it out. I just sent you the link for the one on Amazon. That would probably be the big one that I would recommend in terms of, I mean, that's the historical text that deals with the theology of iconography. I don't think I've read the whole thing. I think I read portions of it when I was in college, but that's the one that really deals with why we have icons and why we have iconography. So I would check that out. On an intercession of the intercession of the saints, really honestly, I would recommend any book on the life of the saints, because what we see is the saints are working miracles, interceding for people, and tremendous things are happening in their lifetime while they're alive, and that doesn't stop. Um, yeah, so the saints, as Saint Paul says, the saints, nobody is dead because all are alive in Christ. It's not like the saints have died and now they're not able to hear our prayers. I threw another one in the chat also, which is The Gurus, the Young Man, and Elder Paisios. It's an amazing book from the life of St. Paisios about a man who was going to India and visiting gurus and doing all this kind of spiritual stuff, quote unquote, and the tremendous effect it had on him, and then his interactions with Saint Paisios interactions for him, the way he healed him, and all those other things that happened. So that would probably be the other one that I would check out on intercession. Thanks again. Uh, Fonk says, Father, my family goes to a non denominational church and I'm interested in the Orthodox Church. Should I leave my family's church behind? God bless. Yeah, I mean, it's these are really hard questions without more details. So, how old are you? Are you married? Does your wife go to the non denominational church? Are you, is it going to cause a major rift in the family? These are very important questions and a really good question. But the thing to take into consideration is you've got to be mindful if you have a wife and children, which I can't tell from your photograph, if it's going to affect them, or you're just saying, hey, I grew up in this and I'm going to go. So it's not that we should avoid it. It's just how we go about it. We shouldn't do it in a way that like can be destructive or jarring to the people around us, but rather explain why it is that we're doing what we're doing, and very much kind of try to work with them and let them know and answer questions and kind of take the time to kind of educate them on what's happening, so that it's not it doesn't create a massive problem within the family. But should you go to the Orthodox Church? Absolutely. You should. It's this is what people need in order to heal their souls. So is that the right decision? Yes, 100%. We just have to be very wise and patient and loving and kind about how we go about it. We're about a quarter of the way through the show. If you don't know, I have a school, skool.com/Father Moses. I'll throw it in the chat. In the school, we also have a live chat every week where you can actually talk to me face to face and ask questions. We have curriculum on the married life, like a whole program on marriage. We have another whole program on dating. We have Q&As that we've done in the past that you can go back and watch, interviews with people, and then we're constantly coming out with new material. So if you get a chance, check it out. Skool.com, skool.com/Father Moses. Lockstep gives me a flex and sunglasses. Thanks, man. We had a good workout tonight. It was a packed house. I think we had like 10 guys in the garage gym tonight, all lifting, doing really good. I think we got 5 guys who are preparing to compete. 4 or 5 guys that are no 5 guys that are preparing to compete here in a couple weeks. I really wish I was competing, but unfortunately, uh, man, I'm not able to right now. I'm a little beat up, and my wife is due with a baby here in 3 weeks. So, trying to squeeze in a powerlifting meet 5 days or so, but before your wife is supposed to have a baby is probably not the wisest idea. Yeah. Orthothog, God bless you. Thanks for the super chat. Father, what is it going to take for us to start building beautiful cathedrals like in Russia? Just a lot more people. I mean, honestly, when we look at the cathedrals in Russia, it's simply the scope and the magnitude and the cost. Historically, we actually had a bit of a difficulty because uh, some of the architectural components were difficult for people here in America, but it looks like I've seen going up recently, getting an onion dome is possible, getting the metal work done, all these different things. It's simply the fact that they are extremely expensive. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't happen. I'm 100% with you. I would love to see amazing, beautiful cathedrals here in America. We're building a church ourselves, God willing, that will be breaking ground on soon. That's 5,500 square feet and set to fit over 500 people. So I'm very excited about this. But the reality is, the cost of it was, I think the cost we're looking at now is probably over a million, 1.5 million. And it's a pretty basic structure. Now, God willing, we'll be able to iconify the entire inside of the church. That's what we're really excited about. So, God willing, the immersive experience within the church is tremendous. But unfortunately, the exterior is going to be not basic, but it's not going to be as extravagant as some of the churches. So maybe 10, 15, 20 years down the line, when we have large parishes and a lot of people contributing, we'll be able to build something that's an absolute incredible, spectacle to the glory of God and his holy church. But right now, yeah, I think every church that's trying to build a church is just trying to come up with the money to just build something that's big enough to hold all the people that are coming into the faith. And right now, that's the main focus and emphasis. James, thank you for the super chat. Father bless. Thank you for your content. Now that Rep Joe Wilson has exposed us all as Russian spies, what is our next step for the motherland? This is hilarious. Yeah, I mean it's funny because we are building this church. We had a large donation of money for the property. They asked me who, the BBC came and did an interview on us. Anyways, long story short is they asked me about the donor, and I just said, hey, I just don't want to give away information about them, whatever else. And then they speculated in the article that it was some foreign money or whatever. And it wasn't at all. Like it had nothing to do with anything outside of America. And it's just the absurdity of this sort of stuff is ridiculous. So, people want to cast aspersions and they want to kind of, it's always since the beginning of time that the church is going to be persecuted, as Christ said. So, what are you going to do? You can't do anything about it, So, what's the best thing that we can do? The best thing that we can do is make America holy. That's the goal. Yeah, we don't need to worry about making America a world power in the sense of military might, although obviously we need to defend our homeland, but really we are striving to make America holy. That is what we need to do for the kingdom of heaven and for the rejuvenation of this country. Because, oh, brothers and sisters, when I look around at this country and what we have going on, it's so tremendously saddening. All of the absurdity and the theatrics and the way that our public life is being shaped. It's always the case that when the culture turns away from Christ, it doesn't become nothing. It takes on some foreign uh, influence uh, spiritually, and that influence is not Christ. And when that happens, the culture begins to debase and degrade itself. And so I think there's a historical saying like every great empire basically fell from the inside as it crumbled morally before it ever was compromised externally. So when we see what's happening in America, I mean, we should be adamant that we need to turn this ship around and do something tremendous. Oh, Lord, have mercy on us. I just pray for the salvation of America and for its holiness, and that people would repent and come to Christ, and that we would see this country thrive, because there's so many good things to say about America. America is, Father Roman Braga, who was a saint, who came to America, said, there's tremendously amazing things about America, including its generosity. This country has been phenomenal in its generosity to the third world and to other people. And it's just, there are so many good things about America and American culture, and the ability to build a life here that, Lord have mercy, like we need Christ so desperately right now. Garrett, thank you for the super chat. Hi, Father. You said in a recent homily, you said depression and anxiety are caused by clinging to our will. It's true. I have PTSD and this makes me anxious over my salvation. Do I need to be free of trauma to be saved? I mean, no, absolutely not. What we need to be saved is have the mercy of God, but we really have to throw ourselves and abandon ourselves to the mercy of God. Once we realize, like, we're never really going to cut it as Christians. We're never going to be perfect. Christ says that verse in the Gospels. Be perfect as your Father in heaven and perfect. It's an injunction to us, but also the reality being that even the saints had faults and foibles. They made mistakes, but us, we commit sins all the time. We don't love God like we should. We don't cling to him like we should. And the reality is that if we are depending upon our own righteousness, or that we're going to be exceptionally good people or something else, yeah, we're going to be so disappointed. I mean, it's not going to happen. So we have to kind of abandon ourselves and continue to pray for Christ to have mercy on us. That's what we need to cling to, the love and the mercy of Christ. We can't cling to our own good behavior, our own righteousness. We really need to cast ourselves at the feet of Christ and beg and pray that he have mercy on us. Nonetheless, says, what do you think about statues and orthodoxy? Well, the historical position of orthodoxy from the Seventh Ecumenical Council was that we were not to have any statues where you could stand behind the statue, so that they were not to be three-dimensional in that way. I saw these carvings recently in Georgia, where they have carved these pillars, but you can't stand behind the quote-unquote statue. So I don't fully understand why there are statues today in the Orthodox Church. They're very rare, but they seem to not be following the teachings of the Seventh Ecumenical Council, although obviously there's some discernment and there's some decision by the bishop that is being made. So I would probably need to have more information on that, but just a cursory glance at it, the normativity in the Orthodox churches, if you have an image that is basically three-dimensional or carved, it is only typically one-sided. It's coming out from a piece of wood or coming out from a piece of stone. It's not 360 degrees where you can walk and stand behind it. You don't know who I am. That's true. Father, I have a quick question about your weightlifting regimen, if you don't mind me asking. Do you work out on Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday? Is there a schedule you recommend, and how often? So one couple things that I would say just off the bat. One, I've been lifting a lot of years, and technically I would be considered kind of an advanced lifter in terms of the weight I'm lifting. When I was a newer lifter, I used to do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So something like upper body Monday, lower body Tuesday, upper body Thursday, lower body Friday. 4 days a week, very much similar to a West Side barbell split. So heavy day and then more like a recuperation or a lighter day. I've now changed. I'm running one of the programs from Swede Burns. You can check out Swede Burns. He's Orthodox. He's on Instagram. I'll actually put a post, I'll put a link to him. I really love Swede as a coach. I've had a number of different coaches over time. Some of them very well known and very famous, and I've had some good results from training with them. So there's a lot of good things that I could say about them. My personal experience is that I probably have had the best experience with Swede. I think that he's done a phenomenal job coaching. So what I do now is a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then Monday. So it's a 4-day, but it's a 9-day rotation. So like Monday is upper body, Wednesday is lower body, Friday is upper body, Monday is lower body. And then it starts over. So it's constantly rolling, but it just gives more recovery time. Instead of 2 days rest, you get 3 days rest basically between everything. And you get 3 or 4 days rest. So if you have a Wednesday lower body, you have Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, then you have a Monday lower body. So you have 4 days of rest. I've just noticed with this methodology, I get the best recovery out of it and I make the most progress. So that is absolutely what I do right now and what I enjoy and what's been most effective for me. So 9-day split, rotating upper lower body, typically an upper body day and then a squat day, upper body day, and then a deadlift day, something like that. So, when I do a secondary lower body day, it's very much back, hamstrings, glutes. It's posterior chain dominant, whereas the squat day is more of a leg day. Sean of the Roses, thank you for the super chat, Sean. James says, in a fight, Judas the Hammer or Joshua son of Nun? I don't know, dude. I don't even know. I don't even know what that means. Oh, yeah, I have no idea, man. I'm sorry, dude. It's a super historical question. Lockstep, is it inappropriate to bless icons more than once? Again, I'm going to pull up an article, blessing icons. What's the name of that? I'm going to see if I can find. Where is it? There's an article that's really good on this. Where is it? Okay, here it is. Does the blessing of icons agree or contradict the tradition of the church? I'm going to throw that in the chat. You can take a chance to read this article. Long story short is that historically, I'll read one part. It says the history from Pentecost to the Seventh Ecumenical Council, which condemned iconoclasm. It says during this period, there is a total silence in the historical documents. As far as we know, no one ever wrote on the subject of blessing images, and there is no trace of prayer for blessing them. So historically speaking, icons were not blessed. They were not put on the altar. This was not not a part of the tradition of the church. So this seems to be something that has happened more recently in church history, where people are blessing icons or setting them on the altar. The understanding historically of the icons was that once the face is painted and the name of the saint is written on the icon, it is technically blessed. At that point, it becomes an icon. It's kind of like blessing crosses. From what I understand, I don't think there's any historical evidence that in the early church that they blessed crosses. So the cross has power that's imbued with it by the fact of Christ's crucifixion. So in that way, there seems to be a little bit of, I don't want to say redundancy, but there's something that doesn't really fully sit with me historically about it. I don't think that it's necessary, although people ask me sometimes to bless a cross or bless an icon. It can certainly be done, but that doesn't mean that it is actually required or necessary. MF Doom, all caps. Your favorite rapper's favorite rapper. Do you watch UFC? If you do you like it? I mean, I grew up watching Pride and early UFC, so I don't watch a lot of it now. Typically, the fights are on Saturday night, and I'm usually serving vigil and hearing confessions on Saturday night. There's a couple guys that are either around the church or come to the church who do watch the fights. I've been meaning to go and watch some fights. I loved watching old Fedor, GSP, the Iceman, Vanderlei Silva. I mean, all those old. So I think that mixed martial arts is fascinating as a way of showing the effectiveness of which martial arts are the best. But I very much like what Fedor says, that it is a sport. It's a sport. In a lot of ways, it's much safer than, say, football. People think that UFC is violent, but I mean, it's much safer compared to football. It's much safer than compared to, say, boxing. So I don't really fall into the camp of worrying about the physical health, per se, of the fighters. What I don't like in modern day UFC is that modern day of UFC has kind of taken a playbook from wrestling, and it's all about grudge matches and anger and hatred and all these other things. And it wasn't like that before. I mean, obviously guys are fighting, so they're very intense, but it didn't have the animosity that it does now. It was normal for guys after a fight to hug each other like they're warriors. They went in there, they gave their best shot, they performed to the best of their ability, they showed what they have, and that was awesome. But today it's like name calling and trolling each other, and it's just so drama filled that I just think it's lame. There's a lot of that I think is super lame. But fundamentally, do I like martial arts? I was just watching a video on Marcelo Garcia today. I think it was today, maybe it was yesterday. I think it was today, actually, rolling jiu-jitsu. I'm not crazy about rolling jiu-jitsu. I've rolled enough jiu-jitsu in my life. But the thing is when I watch Marcelo Garcia roll jiu-jitsu, it's so amazing. It's beautiful. I mean, he's so incredible, especially when he's taking on bigger opponents. Marcelo Garcia, I think, is like 5'6", 5'7". He rolled jiu-jitsu maybe at 155, 165 pounds, very lean. But he would routinely have matches against guys that were 6 foot plus, outweighed them by 70, 80 pounds and would beat them. So there's something awesome and beautiful about that in jiu-jitsu. It's very similar. Like sometimes I watch rock climbing videos. I used to love rock climbing. And when I watch a video on rock climbing, it's like an art. It's a dance in a true sense. It's the movement, the fluid, the flow that people get into. It's incredible. I can't tell you how many times I've watched like Eddie Bravo's video. I think it's where he's rolling Royler Gracie at Abu Dhabi, I think it was. And that video is like, it's just inspiring. It's amazing. He was like a nobody going against somebody who was super established. And his technique is so awesome that he totally took, Royler out of his game and brought him in to his own world and was able to tap him out, which was basically unheard of at the time. So yeah, in that way, I love fighting sports. I love watching them. They're exciting. They're awesome. Mitch and Christina says, would it be appropriate to wear short-sleeved collared shirts in church if I have 2 full tattoo sleeves? I would say this is kind of a gray area. I wouldn't necessarily tell somebody not to. The main thing that I would say is if you're new to a parish, it just creates less distraction to wear a long sleeve shirt. I mean, I have full sleeves, right? So I have tattoos. So, but I just think that it can create a distraction or maybe even a temptation for other people, especially if you have something really shocking in the tattoos that draws a lot of attention to you. That's what I would say is the thing that we want to avoid is uh, anything that creates makes us a spectacle or draws attention to us during the liturgy. So I would definitely recommend, at least for the first few times that you go to liturgy, just to wear a long sleeve shirt, see what the vibe is, see if anybody else has tattoos. And certainly if you have anything in your tattoos that's questionable or enticing or is going to be distracting to other people, I would avoid wearing a short sleeve shirt. If it's not, if it's not going to cause a problem or a distraction, which it probably won't or shouldn't, then I don't see a big problem with it. Yeah, Carson said people in the chat are asking about tattoos. Can you discuss the Orthodox view if getting more as an Orthodox permitted, if clergy can get new ones, etc.? So I think as far it depends on the bishop. I don't know. I don't think there's any bishops who will bless people to get tattoos after they are ordained. Now, when we talk about the Orthodox position on something, there's kind of two ways to look at it. Number one is we have the canons of the church, which are basically the rules and the laws of the church. I don't believe there's anything in any of the canons that actually condemns tattooing. That's number one. The second part is, even though it's not condemned in the canons of the church, what do we typically hear? And that's a completely different scenario. So I think the caution with tattoos is the way in which they can puff up the ego or draw attention to a person. Now, can you do that wearing extravagant clothing and whatever else? Yes, right. So this is where I kind of draw the line, just in my experience, which is, somebody can show up to a monastery and they're looked askance because they have tattoos, and then somebody else can show up with a $1,500 purse and nobody says anything. Or they show up with a gold Rolex that's worth $40,000 and nobody thinks a second thought about it. So I feel like there's a little bit of a contradiction when it comes to tattoos, that people seem to come down very hard on tattoos, but then there are things that people do that seem to also be questionable that nobody talks about. So I can't, the one thing that I would say for anybody is if you have a serious question about it, it's best to talk to your spiritual father or potentially even write the bishop and ask if he has any wisdom or guidance on this. We certainly don't want to get anything that we would regret, anything that glamorizes something that isn't Christian, whatever else. But there is, I think it's maybe the oldest tattooing family in the world is in Jerusalem, and I believe that they're Orthodox and they tattoo people. So we probably need to do a video on it at some point, but really that requires also the input from the bishops and what they want to share, because again, like I said, there's nothing in the canons that speaks specifically on this. Orthodoxus says, hey, I'm struggling with cannabis addiction. It's been a week since I quit and I've been smoking it since a young teenager. Any advice? Yeah, man. Big one is detoxing off of the cannabinoids and getting them out of your system. So doing sauna. I would recommend getting blood work done and see if you have any nutritional deficiencies. Like a lot of people tend to be low on vitamin D and other supplements that they need to take in order to regulate their hormones or their blood work. So I would definitely recommend doing blood work, and just to kind of help you bounce back and start to feel more normal afterwards. Other than that, this is the hard part about addiction, no matter what addiction it is. There's always a period of kind of withdrawal. And certainly, uh, cannabis has a very strong effect on the mind and the mind body connection. So, again, doing something like sauna, drinking a lot of water, trying to flush out and detox your system, right? It tends to stay in your body for a long period of time. And you want to kind of get through some of those physical withdrawals that you're experiencing right at the beginning, because you're basically used to giving your body a substance. Even if the substance isn't good for you, It's like somebody who's a heavy smoker and very nicotine addicted. They go through withdrawals afterwards because their brain is used to receiving the chemical or caffeine addiction. And then obviously there's more serious addictions like heroin or whatnot. So that would be the one thing that I would look at. And the number that would be the kind of physical component, blood work, detoxing, purifying your body. And then on the spiritual side, I would say, man, just stay close to your priest, keep them updated every day, start to count your days of sobriety, make sure that you're talking with him about that. Um, just keep pushing forward and having the goal to stay sober every single day because I've seen this with people. It's like, it says, I think in the Proverbs, like a dog returning to vomit. People get so used to a sin that they go back to it and then they realize that they were very brainwashed by it. And cannabis is one of those drugs that absolutely brainwashes people. It makes their mind unstable, paranoid, anxious. So, of course, if you take it away, you're going to be struggling physically as well as mentally. The main thing to do is read the lives of the saints, read the Holy Gospels, pray, stay close to your priest, and just keep pushing forward because it absolutely will get better. Lockstep, thanks for the super chat. 70% Muay Thai and 30% Jiu-Jitsu, my preference. Yeah, it's interesting, especially I think you brought up the UFC question earlier, right? Uh, well, maybe somebody else. Oh, MF Doom brought up the UFC. Anyways, one of the things that's interesting about mixed martial arts is like such a big emphasis early on about jujitsu, and then when everyone kind of figured out jujitsu, a lot less of an emphasis. And now there's such a heavy emphasis on wrestling and Muay Thai. So it's interesting that the sport has adapted so much. It's not really the same as it used to be in terms of how the fights go and what people are training and trying to figure out. So very, it's important. A lot of guys that were heavy on the jujitsu side have found out that jujitsu, wearing gloves, and in terms of a fight where somebody can strike you, is not as effective as it was once deemed to be when people were wearing the gi, and also when people really had no clue what jujitsu was. So there definitely is more of an emphasis today on striking and especially leg kicks. I mean, leg kicks is one of those things that just seems to be so different than it used to be in UFC that there's a much greater emphasis on it today. Okay. You don't know who I am. Asking for somebody in the chat. A Muslim friend in Jordan saw a silhouette of the Theotokos in a Christian cemetery and started dreaming of Christ. Yeah, I mean, these things happen. Sometimes we see this in people's lives that there's something absolutely supernatural that happens that draws them into Christ in a way that is profound and mysterious and outside of kind of the norm. So, time to go to the Orthodox Church. That's what that means. Time to go to church. Christ is calling. Bailey, thank you for the super chat. How should I go about finding a wife? How can I come to know if marriage is God's calling for me? This is a great question, Bailey. It comes up a lot, and people will ask, should I be married? Should I be monastic? I love the life of St. Paisios because he said even when he had an inclination about the person, he didn't tell them what to do. So the number one question, there's two different questions. How should you go about finding a wife? And how do we know that it's God's calling? God gives us freedom. That's the reality. The reality is that we have to make a decision what suits our vision of life, our temperament, our desire, but also, and this is the part that people often miss out on, is they'll come to me and they'll say, Father, should I get married or should I become monastic? And I say, who are you planning on marrying? And they're like, I don't know. Then I'm like, what monastery are you hoping to join? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, that's the thing, is that marriage and monasticism are deeply interpersonal experiences. So it's not just being a monastic in the sense of just being a monastic. Being a monastic is being part of a brotherhood or a sisterhood and having an abbot or a yeranda that is somebody that you are connected with and that you want to emulate their spiritual life. a monk from Mount Athos once told me, he said, I could not become a monk at any of the other monasteries on Mount Athos. I would have been depressed for the rest of my life. They said I had to become a monk at this monastery with this abbot, like this Yaranda, this elder that was at this monastery. He was the one that I connected with. And they said I never even considered becoming a monastic. They said the experience of meeting the elder was so profound that it absolutely changed their view on monasticism, and they wanted to be close to the elder. So likewise with marriage, it's not just marriage as a calling. The church has blessed both paths, both marriage and monasticism, and people have free will and the ability to choose what they want. But marriage is very much about the person, right? So if somebody asked me now, if you could go back in time, would you have been a monk or would you have been married? It's an impossibility to answer. The reality is that I met my wife. I had such a strong connection with her, and there was kind of an intangible element to our relationship that is still there, 25 years later. And we've been married for 23 years. We're more in love now. We're more into each other now than we've ever been. The love has grown exponentially through the shared struggle, through having children, through all of these experiences of life. We're even more deeply devoted and in love with each other. But fundamentally, if you went back in time and I saw that at the time, that relationship and that connection with my wife, the reality is becoming a monk would have said, hey, I can't have a relationship with her. And I don't know if I could have chosen that. I really don't. Now, do I think if I had gone back and known about monasticism, I would have had a desire or at least a draw to it? I believe so. I think there's aspects of it that are a very natural fit for my personality. But again, the way to determine these things is like going to a monastery, staying for a week, go for 3 days or 4 days, whatever the abbot will let you, go back to the world, go back to the monastery, stay there for a week, visit, travel, go to other monasteries. You have to experience and be immersed a little bit in the life to really understand if it fits your disposition, because that's really what we're talking about. Everybody has a temperament, a disposition, a desire that meets their personality, that is unique for them, but it also is uniquely linked to the monastery. And it's true, if you talk to monastics, they don't say that they could be monks at any old monastery. They're very much connected with the brotherhood at that monastery. So they have a connection there. Like you may go as a visitor and visit a certain monastery, and just the way the vibe is at the monastery, it's not that it's a bad monastery, it just may not be a fit for your personality. Then you may go to another monastery and meet the monks and be like, man, this is a real brotherhood. I can get along with these guys. I can spend time with them. This is a good fit. But again, marriage and monasticism are deeply interpersonal and very specific for the individual. It's not just a one size fits all, any shape or size, works. Even in marriage, you really have to find somebody that you have a connection with, that you appreciate, that you love, that you want to spend your life with. I often tell people, and I talk about this in my dating course at school.com, skol.com/Father Moses. I have a whole dating course series in there. I say one of the criteria to determine whether or not you're going to get married is after you've been with that person for 3 to 6 months, can you imagine your life without them? Because if you can imagine your life without them and you don't feel like you would have any regrets if you didn't marry them, it's probably a sign that the connection isn't very deep and that you really could go on with your life. It doesn't mean that that's a bad person. It just means that they're not the right fit for you. So again, back to your first question, how to find a wife. I mean, the reality is it's the same for a monastery, which is like if there's not viable options in your local parish, you've got to travel around to other parishes. You've got to find people who are, that are available, that are single. So, a lot of times guys will ask me, even in my own parish, like, hey, Father, there's not like a lot of women. I'm like, join online groups that are Orthodox, travel to the local parishes. When there's a local parish feast day within a 2 or 3 hour radius, drive to the feast day, put yourself out there, go and introduce yourself to young young women, right? But you have to be proactive. You can't just sit and back and kind of pray passively and expect something to happen. You actually have to put in some effort. So those are my answers for those two. Mitch and Christina, thank you guys again for the super chat. Coming from a charismatic Protestantism, struggling to know how to pray correctly now. Do you have any recommendations? Yeah, the one recommendation I have, I'll put it in the chat, which is a good basic introduction to prayer, which is the Jordanville Prayer Book. It's put out by the Monastery of the Holy Trinity in New York. We have we go through a lot of these at our parish. We give them out. We sell them in the bookstore. They're all over the place. But that is a great resource. I just put it in the chat for you, Mitch and Christina, for uh, being able to, for being able to learn how to pray. It has all the basics of the prayer life, which is the morning and evening prayers, uh, prayers to the Mother of God, prayers to Christ. But fundamentally, it just has the morning and evening prayers, which is how we structure our day. So we very much structure our day around prayer, both starting and ending our day with prayer. And I would recommend checking that out as a great resource. Buy a prayer book. You can't go wrong with that. Luke McSween. The other one I was going to recommend is for prayer, which would be what is it called? It's the Way of the Pilgrim. That's a great. Hold on. That's another great resource of just reading and understanding the basics of the tradition of the church on the Jesus prayer. Now, if you're going to be practicing the Jesus prayer and you're not trying to have visions or whatever else, you're fine as long as you're praying it in the right way. But it very much shows you the basic way of the life of saying the Jesus prayer as part of life and part of our experience. So thank you guys so much for the super chats. Luke McSween, with girlfriend for 2.5 years, have fornicated, broke up 3 times, always come back together. Woo! How do you know if two people should marry, build a family together? Do you recommend getting married once you're 18? Well, I mean, I got married at 20. My wife had just turned 21, but we had been together for 2 years. I think the big thing here, Luke, that I would say that really stands out to me is y'all just need to get some, y'all need to get some help from a priest. Sit down and talk, do some premarital counseling. See what the priest thinks. Ask him because he knows you guys. Is there a good connection there? Is a viability? Do you guys have problems with explosive temperaments, and that's why you guys are breaking up? Do you guys have problems with communication? Are you not on the same page? Are you guys too similar? Is that the problem? So when somebody asks, do you recommend getting married at 18? It's not that I would ever discourage anybody from getting married at 18. I don't think it's a bad decision. But the reality is it's very hard to get married at 18 because you may not have anybody around that you're actually connected with. And you have to remember that part of getting married is starting a family. A lot of people at 18 don't have the financial means of actually starting a family. And so getting married at 18 is not a reality, because children is a natural byproduct of being married. I mean, that's our understanding of the intimacy of marriage. It serves two purposes: to draw the two people together and to procreate and to make children. So if two people don't have the maturity of being able to support a marriage or support a pregnant wife or having children, it's probably unadvisable to get married at that point, simply because you're not able to start a family. It takes a lot of wisdom and discernment to do that. But I would say, like, for whatever it's worth, Luke, breaking up 3 times is a big red flag. I mean, that shows that there are like fundamental problems in the relationship where there's communication breakdown and hurt feelings. And I don't obviously know all the dynamics that are at play within the relationship, but it certainly is a sign that there are some red flags that need to be addressed. And ideally, you can address them with a priest who's able to kind of help and guide and direct you guys. That would be my recommendation is make sure that you have a priest who's able to help you guys navigate because obviously there's stuff going on in the relationship that needs to be sorted out before entering into marriage. Billy Hart, thanks for the super chat. You said, have you had more weird interactions with evangelicals since that politician accused Roe Courtiers of being Russian state agents? No. I mean, I haven't seen anything. I mean, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, it's the great irony of like somebody saying that Russian priests are state agents. Meanwhile, like pretty much almost every priest I know, whether or not they're Russian, is living like, paycheck to paycheck, hand to mouth. So the great irony is like priests are just financially struggling to get by, and then somebody comes out and says they're Russian state agents. It's like, well, where's the money and the lavish lifestyle, and what are they influencing? Like, what are they influencing, and what kind of what kind of intelligence are they gathering? It's an absurdity. Like the whole thing is so stupid. It's so low IQ and so accusatory. It's ridiculous. It's not even to be taken seriously. But no, I haven't had any negative interactions with anybody since it happened. I mean, it's just water off a duck's back. It doesn't matter. Bailey, thank you for answering my first question. How important would you say physical attraction in a marriage relationship is? Well, Bailey, I think I think the reality is that it is important. I mean, there's no way that you can like minimize the importance of that. And there's a couple reasons. One is you're going to be with this person for the majority of your life. So you have to feel like there's a bond, there's a connection, and that there's an attraction there to them, right? Sometimes I've had guys ask me about, being attracted to a woman. I'm like, part of being married to a woman is complimenting her on her beauty and the fact that you love her and that you think she's wonderful and that you're going to be waking up to that person for the next 30, 40 years. So it would be a disservice to marry somebody that you weren't attracted to, particularly if you're a man, because men are more visual in this way than women are, and you're kind of robbing the person of being with somebody who really truly appreciates and values them and is able to compliment them correctly. So I think the problem becomes is that people try to over spiritualize very practical things. One of the things that you realize in interacting with monastics is they're very practical people. So you have to understand in marriage, that is the person that you're going to be intimate with, and you're going to be physically intimate with them a lot. You should feel like you're into that person and that you want to be intimate with them. And you certainly don't want a scenario where one of the people is kind of, I don't, maybe repulsed is a strong word, but not into their spouse. Like physical intimacy is an important part of marriage. That's just reality. So you have to find the other person attractive. I don't think you can navigate around human nature and the way that we are. Yes, we may be fallen, and yes, this world is imperfect, but the reality is like everybody needs to be with somebody who really appreciates values and wants to be close and wants to be in love with the person that they're marrying. So, for women, it's a little different because women tend to be more physically attracted to men that they are emotionally connected to, whereas men seem to have uh, less. It tends to change their view of the person less, even if they know them. For instance, if a guy is not very attractive, but a woman is very connected to him, she sees him as being more attractive. Whereas if a guy sees a woman and he's very much into her, it doesn't mean that she becomes way more attractive just because he likes her or because he has a connection with her. That's just something I've observed. So, is it important? Yeah, you're going to spend the whole life with that person. It is important. It's just not the most important. That's the thing that I would emphasize. And I think sometimes with men that they have unrealistic expectations or unrealistic, we could say, desires. They're looking for kind of, I don't know, some ideal or perfection or whatever else. And that's not healthy. That's not healthy. What's most important in the person that you're marrying is their character and their love for God. Those are the most important things. But you certainly need to have an attraction and a desire to be with them because that's a big part of your life together. Uh, Yosh 2000 says, "Thank you for the super chat. You said, Father, bless your thoughts on protein alternatives during the upcoming fast, particularly tofu for men." Well, there's a lot of vegan protein powders. There's Whey Isolate, which removes the lactose or the dairy flavor from the protein powder. I would talk to your priest about that. I think I mentioned this in another um, interview that I did, which is there are high rates of contamination in a lot of vegan proteins. So you have to be careful that what you're buying is actually not contaminated and or dangerous for you. You want to make sure that you are um, doing something that is a very good and clean and healthy protein source if it's vegan. The other consideration for a lot of people is the financial burden. The reality is a lot of vegan protein powders are exponentially more expensive than whey or whey isolate. So my recommendation, anything when it comes to fasting is always the same, which is talk to your spiritual father, explain your financial situation to them, talk to them about what an alternative could look like. Now, certain things like tofu, I would rather eat shrimp than tofu. That's just me. I'm not crazy about tofu. My wife certainly eats tofu. No, I'm just not a big fan of it. So, the reality is that it's hard to get enough protein out of a strictly vegan diet. Um, yeah, in certain places like Moscow and other places, they eat a lot more fish during the nativity fast than some of the calendars here in America. So again, it's really a conversation for your spiritual father. Excuse me. The meat pill. Thank you for your videos on how men control their thoughts. Awesome, man. Thank you for the super chat. The concept of the thought NATO and the following suggestions help my mind be clear. That's wonderful, man. That's fantastic. I'm really glad that they've been helpful for you. A lot of people forget, like, a lot of the things that I say in my videos are the byproduct of reading the saints, but it's also putting them into modern day language and also my experience in my own life of dealing with intrusive thoughts and anxiety and fear and depression and these sort of things. So, very much in my own life, these are things that I've been struggling with. And that's why I'm able to put them uh, into these video formats, is because, like, these are real struggles from my own life. This is not like I woke up one day and was magically a priest and had read all the saints. The reality is that I started out like everybody, and then, in my case, in my mid-20s, with a lot of emotional baggage, a lot of mental baggage, and I did not understand the thought life, how to control it, and how to modify it. So I appreciate the super chat, man. I think that's all the super chats we have for right now. I'll switch over to the live. Here we go. Very important question from Batcher 4788. How much do you incline bench? Let's find out. I don't know. I have no idea because I don't max out on things like incline bench. Uh, incline bench tonight. I did 330 for an AMRAP for 11 reps at a 30 degree. So if we go into the 1RM calculator, it says 440. I don't know how accurate that is. Probably somewhere over 400 pounds. The problem is controlling that type of weight on the incline. is vastly more difficult than it is on a flat bench. And that's where it really becomes hard. I have a hard time believing I could incline 440, but maybe at least high 300s, low 400s would be my guess. Yeah. Panagenesis says, is flat bench more dangerous than incline? Not in my opinion. It's all about how you bench. So a lot of bodybuilders have stopped doing or caution about doing bench press, but that's because they're bringing the bar down at or above basically the nipple line. And because of that, they're putting tremendous strain on their pectorals and their front delts. It's very hard. It's very hard and heavy when you do that, but they're doing it for aesthetic reasons to build up the pectoral muscles. And so they're coming down or even coming down part way. I think I saw a video with Jay Cutler, and he was touching very high on his chest, and I don't think he was coming down all the way. That's not a powerlifting bench. A powerlifting bench, right, is sinking down into the lats, lowering the bar on your lats, and controlling it and touching basically your upper sternum, about 2 inches or so, depending, lower than basically where your nipples fall. Lowering it down there and then pressing primarily with the triceps is vastly more safe than trying to control it basically over your head at this kind of awkward angle. That's the hard thing with pressing exercises, which is, when you do pressing exercises overhead and whatnot, you're using a lot more shoulders, obviously some pecs, not as much triceps, but it's also the angle is kind of somewhat awkward. I just find like standing military press, when you get into the mid 200s or upper 200s, somewhere 250 to 275, just to brace and hold that weight and stabilize it, very hard, very challenging, whereas laying on your back and controlling the weight away from you is much, much easier. Father, how can I overcome sexual sin? Thank you, Bailey, for the super chat. How can I overcome sexual sin, especially fornication? There's a lot that goes into that, Bailey, but specifically, I always try to remind people of one fact, which is you don't commit sins that you're not thinking about. So if you're not thinking of something like, there's somebody today who's really struggling with heroin addiction, and you go, why are they struggling with heroin addiction? The reason that they're struggling with it is because they're remembering. The temptation is there through the provocation of thoughts. Now, you and I have no thoughts about heroin today. It's not even an issue. So if somebody came up and said, hey, do you want heroin? You're like, no, of course not, right? The problem with the sins, the sexual sins, is they begin in the mind. The Holy Fathers tell us if we don't entertain the thoughts, we will not commit the sin. It always starts in the life of the thoughts, thinking, contemplating, thinking about how we can accomplish something or do something. That's where it always starts. So if we cut out the thoughts and the provocation, specifically using the Jesus prayer and going and keeping accountable with our priest and fasting on Wednesdays and Fridays and learning that self-control and that temperance, Lord have mercy, it's the spiritual connection with God. God is the one who is able to lift the burden off of us. It's like I always tell everybody, it's kind of like you're bench pressing. This is the analogy that I use. And it's like you can't lift it, but God works as like a spotter who's helping you lift the bar up. So in and of itself, yes, that addiction can be too much for people, but with God's help, it is certainly possible for someone to cut out the thoughts, not entertain them, not dwell on them, not feed into them, say the Jesus prayer when they come up, wake up in the morning and say their prayers before bed, fast, stay accountable with their priest. In all of those ways, it's like cutting grass. The reason the grass doesn't grow tall is not because it doesn't want to. And that's the reality, is that nobody ever gets over sin to the point where they can never imagine doing it again or whatever else, or it's suddenly they're not attracted to women or some like weird thing, right? I tell this funny story about a man who goes to the monastery. He's talking to the abbot of the monastery, and he's like, "Father," he's like, "I'm really struggling." He says, "Like, I'm attracted to women. I'm really attracted to them." He's like, "Okay." He's like, "What's the problem?" He's like, "Well, I'm really attracted to them." And he said, "Like, my son, if you weren't attracted to women, we'd be having a different conversation altogether." So the reality is the fact that we have hormones, specifically testosterone, at much higher levels than women do, just naturally. Some, easily, could be 10 times the amount of testosterone that a woman has. And that's the primary hormone that is driving men for their sexual desire. So we're not battling human nature where we're expecting God to take this away and suddenly we're not going to be men anymore. The reality is that we can fully live life as a man, but without entertaining any degenerate thoughts in our mind. If we cut off the thoughts, it's like cutting the grass. It's not going to grow up. It doesn't mean that it doesn't want to, but we have to be very, very, very diligent in cutting off the thoughts and not entertaining them and staying away from things that are provocative for us. Like if somebody says, "Father, I'm really struggling with lust when I go to the gym," it's like, you probably need to build a home gym or find someplace else to train that is not constantly causing you to be tempted to commit the sin. So find a way around that so that you're not watering that grass so that it starts to grow up. Those are the main things that I would focus on, Bailey. Escape Gulag, thank you so much. I'm sorry if you meant to put something in the super chat. If you put something in the live chat, I'll try to grab your what's it called, your question, if you want to put it in there, if you forgot to put it in there or something else. But God bless you. Thank you for the super chat. Colby, thoughts on friends with the opposite sex? So this is a great question, Colby. Thanks for asking it. The reality is if you're a single person and you're looking to find someone to marry, there's not really a lot of reasons because, the reality is you're looking for a spouse. And when you have a spouse, one of the things with having a spouse is not having, relationships with people of the opposite sex, right? It is a temptation. When you have a spouse, you are bonding to one person at the exclusion of everybody else. And especially if you have a wife, you're bonding to your wife. You don't have friends. I don't believe in this. I don't encourage it. I think it's a terrible idea. It leads to lots of temptations and problems for people. Since I've been with my wife for 25 years, basically from the time that we got married, we just didn't have friends. Why would I call up another woman on the phone and talk about my day or discuss something with them? That's all of that attention is only for my wife. So having friends doesn't really make sense if you're trying to get married, because once you get married, you're not going to be able to keep those relationships or even nurture them in any way, shape, or form. So it doesn't make sense. It only leads to temptation and problems. So I would avoid it. Uh, Disgruntled Docs, thank you so much for this amazing question. He said, "Question, Father, if I'm victim weight but do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and following the style of Marcelo Garcia and I'm a similar build, will I make it?" It's so funny. This has just been blown out of proportion so many times. A normal man with normal body fat at 200 pounds, that's 5'10", obviously is a normal sized person. That is not a huge person. Marcelo Garcia being 5'6" or whatever he was. Let's see, how tall was Marcelo Garcia? 5'8". and he weighed in at 154 pounds. So there's a good chance that he was cutting weight in order to make the fights. So maybe it was 165, could even have been 175. People don't realize that, but a lot of these fighters that they say, oh, this guy's fighting at 155, he's not 155 pounds. A lot of times these guys are walking around at 175 to 185, and they're under 5'10". And also, they're not carrying much body fat. So they're very low, like sub 10% body fat. That's not a normal build. That's a build of an athlete. A normal man at 5'10" and 200 pounds is very, very, very kind of average. I think the Gracies had a statement in jiu-jitsu that was about giving up weight, and they said something about along the lines of basically like, if you're giving up like 20 pounds, it's equivalent of a belt. So if you have two blue belts and one's 150 and one's 170, the 170 is more like a purple belt because they're giving up so much weight. That's why we have weight classes in fighting. So Disgruntled Doc, I hope that you make it. And that's it. That's all I have. I don't see any other super chats, so I'll just keep answering the normal chats. Yeah. So Panagenesis says they cut weight for the weigh-in and then they load up for the fight. That's 100% true. I mean, I knew a guy, he wrestled at, he works out in my gym. I think he wrestled at 198, and he said he was 230 before weigh-ins. I think he's 6'1". So he was like cutting 30 pounds of water weight. You know, when you see a guy who's 155-pound fighter, he's not 155 pounds on the street. He's like 175 to 185. And those guys that are 155 fighters, they're not 5'10". All those guys are like short, 5'6" to 5'8". They're not 5'10", very rarely. Escape the Gulag says wrestling is a great combat sport. I think, you know, wrestling has shown itself to be very, very, very advantageous in martial arts. So it's something that's great for your kiddos to do. Obviously, all these type of sports are great. I mean, it teaches your kids, you know, they have confidence. They understand that if they were ever in an altercation, they know what to do. So it removes that fear. It removes that insecurity. It teaches discipline. It's great for their bodies. People don't, so often, people don't realize, I have 5 sons from age 2 to age 13. Boys have a lot of energy, period. And when you homeschool them, you're with them all day. They need to get out and do something. Like, they need to be worked. If they're not worked, they want to eat the furniture or torment their brothers. So physical fitness is not like something that's optional, especially when you have kids. I think that's one of the biggest reasons we have so many problems in the public education system, is like, you're basically taking this feral animal that wants to run all day, and then you're caging them in a little chair and expecting them to learn by staring at a board. Like, that's not boys. That's not how boys learn. They want to fidget. They want to move. They want to go on walks. They need to routinely stretch their legs and get their energy out. You know, there's days where, you know, almost every day I take my kids for a walk, and my kids go to jiu-jitsu a lot, but they need to do that. If they don't do that, it's not good for them at all. It's not optional for boys to have a sport. They need a sport. They absolutely need a sport. Yaz loves God with the super chat. Thank you so much for the super chat. You said, Father, should I try to use the personality God has given me or try to have the personality of Christ? I mean, the reality is like, God created you, and he created variety for this reason. The number one place that we should look is the saints. did the saints have unique personalities, or were they all kind of cookie cutter images of each other? So many times people come to Orthodoxy and they see this kind of Eastern model of the gurus. And the gurus are like, they just talk a certain way, they move a certain way, whatever else. There's a great story. I think it's Metropolitan Athanasius of Limassol who tells it, that he's visiting a monastery. He wasn't a bishop at the time or a metropolitan. He was a monk, maybe a priest monk. And he was in the refectory where they're eating food. And he sees this monk, and this monk is telling this wild story, and all the other monks are laughing. And he jumps up on the table and like acts out this whole thing. And everybody's laughing and they're loving it. And he asked somebody else, he says, "Who's that monk?" And they said, "Oh, that's Father Paisios." And he's like, "Elder Paisios?" They say, "Yeah, that's the elder." And he's like, "Really?" They're like, "Yeah." People, all the saints were their authentic self. Whenever we read the lives of the saints, we very much get a sense of their temperament, their personality. I think it was St. Paisios who said, personality is incurable. It's intrinsic to who we are. We are deified, or we go through the process of theosis as our authentic self. That does not change for anybody, right? So like, you have to work with what you have, and you have to purify the passions, the ego, the pride. But fundamentally, who you are is who God intended you to be. So if you look at a St. Paisios, he had a certain temperament, a certain way with people. You know, he was very welcoming. He would crack jokes. He would do these different things. He related to people a lot and conversed with them and did all these things. That was his life. You read St. Joseph the Hesychast, and St. Joseph the Hesychast is like not letting people in if they came at the wrong time. He's not necessarily talking to them a lot. He's very, very strict on his monastic rule and his prayer life. He values that above everything else. That's all a reflection of his personality and his temperament. Then let's say you go to St. Silouan. St. Silouan, more quiet, didn't share his spiritual experiences with people, was a quote unquote good monk. I remember it was somebody who said after they died, after St. Silouan died, they said something along the lines of, "Father Silouan has died, and now they want to make him a saint. I used to drink, vodka a little bit, not like getting drunk. I used to drink a little vodka with Father Silouan every night," because they just said he was a good monk. He was obedient. He did what he was supposed to do, and he very much hid his interior spiritual life. That was his temperament. Then he has his disciple, Elder Sophrony, who eventually ends up in Essex, England. And Elder Sophrony is very people-oriented. Lots of visitors, lots of people that he talked to, that he prayed with, that he ministered for. He was a priest monk. Father Silouan was, St. Silouan was never a priest monk. He was a simple monk in many regards. So even though he was his elder Sophrony, his disciple, was not like St. Silouan. Different personalities, different callings, different characteristics. All of these things are very temperaments. These are all very intrinsic to who we are. But we have to get rid of the pride. We have to get rid of the egotism. We have to get rid of the sins. We have to purify our hearts and really devote them to Christ. In that way, our personality will really shine through in the way that God intended it to. I often notice this a lot when you go to monasteries. Even when you go to a monastery, you meet all the different monks. In a sense, there's a similarity about how they look. They're all wearing the same thing, or they all have beards, or they're all nuns, and they're all wearing the habit. But their personalities are so rich, so full. They're so full of life. Being our authentic self makes us full of life. Being united to Christ and having our personality purified from the self-love or the egotism or the man-pleasing, the disobedience, the self-will. It makes our authentic self really shine. Great question, man. I love that question. You don't know who I am. Harjat Singh is Sikh, wants to follow Christ, but doesn't want to leave his family. Do you have advice for his journey to Christ? Can you pray for him? The words of Christ, immediately come to mind. Whoever loves father or mother, brother or sister more than me is not worthy of me. The reality is that Christ is our ultimate destination, not our family. The family, I'm not saying that family isn't important or that we shouldn't love our family. That's would be absurd. Obviously, we're supposed to love and respect and honor them. But the reality is that our souls were created for union with God. They were created in such a way that we find our fulfillment in Christ, man. So we can't be somebody that we're not in order to please the people around us. If the people around us love us, they will accept us for who we are authentically. And if the people around us reject us because we are being authentic with God, then so be it. That is on them, and that's for them to figure out. But fundamentally, our true self is to be united to Christ. And I encounter this all the time. Just so you know, this is not unique to being a Sikh. This happens all the time with Protestant converts. All the time. All the time. The parents harass them. They get angry at them. Some people are shunned by their parents because they want to become Orthodox. You know, I'm very much reminded of the Gospels where Christ is talking about eating his body and drinking his blood. And some people, it says, found this to be a hard saying, and they left because of what Christ was saying. And then he turns to the apostles and he says to them, "What about you?" And they say to him, "We have nowhere else to go." So for somebody who wants and knows and has a desire to love Christ, look, man, there's nowhere else to go. That's it. You know, we were talking earlier about all these things with Russian influence. And I'm like, man, all these priests that I know who are killing themselves, working full time, working 7 days a week, working absurd hours, they could make so much more money if they were Protestant. And I'm sure a lot of them are aware of that. But it's like, when you know Christ and you're in his church, where are we going to go? Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? We have nothing to do. If we're in his church and this is the calling and we have to suffer and struggle in this way, then so be it. Because there's no alternative for us. There's nothing else that we can do. And when you are uniquely drawn to Christ and Christ is the center of your life, man, there's nowhere else to go. If I offend people and my love for Christ offends the people around me, so be it. But there's no one else. I can't love anybody more than I love Christ. Not my wife, not my children, not my parents, nobody. Christ is everything. False Zoe says, "Is it blessed to do kettlebells? More Orthodox because it's Russian. I feel like CrossFit has too much of a Protestant spirit. Seems kind of made up." Well, the thing that I would say about CrossFit specifically is that it has a lot of bad programming and it has a very high rate of injury. That's why people should avoid doing CrossFit. Now, somebody says, "I love CrossFit. It's all I want to do." I could care less. I don't think that there's a blessing to do kettlebells or powerlifting, or one is more orthodox per se than the other. They're all just sports. They're just for fun. You know, is Sambo more orthodox because it's in Russia than jiu-jitsu? You know, I don't think that there's any kind of carryover between our faith and whatnot and a particular exercise program. I think people should avoid CrossFit because of the high rate of injury, the poor programming, the atrocious coaching, the poor technique that is emphasized. There's just endless reasons to avoid CrossFit. But if somebody loves to do it and they're staying fit and they're not getting it, and they're not getting injured, God bless them. Do whatever keeps you healthy is my opinion. Omega Green says, "What is the Orthodox understanding of divorce under the new covenant? Is it only permitted if there's adultery and abandonment by an unbeliever?" Well, the one thing that I would say is it's not so much only permitted. I would say, generally speaking, if you talk to a bishop, if there was physical abuse or physical violence or abuse to the children or some other dangerous aspect that is happening, then certainly I can't imagine a bishop not blessing a person to separate and potentially divorce because of that. It's not so much that the church blesses divorce. This is kind of a misunderstanding. You used the right language and said, "Is it permitted?" that is probably the better language to use, and you used it. But certainly I talk to people, I meet people who basically say, well, I'm getting divorced, or what do you think about divorce? And it's for a lot of very trite reasons: personalities, disagreements, temperaments. There's no divorce because you married the wrong person. I made a video on that, actually. I'll put it in the chat, called "Why You'll Marry the Wrong Person," and I'll share it in the chat. It's one of my early videos, but I think it's very important. And it's basically the point is that, like, people marry a lot of times, and I would say probably the majority of times, and realize that they've married somebody that is difficult to be married to for a variety of reasons. That's pretty much everybody. That is not cause for a divorce. But I think certainly what you said, adultery, abandonment, physical abuse, these sort of things, endangerment to the children, those would all be aspects that would be permitted. Father, I feel conflicted working on my business when a lot of the teachings are about denying yourself, being humble with what you have. The great question, Alfredito. Thank you for the super chat. The reality is that when you're reading books by monastics, not everything they say is applicable to lay people. You know, the reality is that you have to live in the world and make money, and potentially make money for your family and for your children in order to provide for them and take care of them. So I would look at the example of Saint Seraphim of Ritsa. You can read about him. I'll put it in the chat. He was a merchant. I think he dealt in fur coats, is what he did. He actually was very wealthy in his life. Let me see if this is, it may be in this Life of the Saint. I'll share it in the chat, but just at least so you have his name, you can go and look him up. But he made a lot of money, and he donated a lot of money to the church. So when you have children to feed and a wife to take care of, it's not reality to, subjugate your wife to a very difficult, a depressing life, simply because, you don't want to be too involved in business. I mean, the reality is, if you're going to have children and you're going to have a big family, like I have 5 children, 5 boys, and I have God willing, a daughter on the way here in a couple of weeks. The reality is it's expensive. It costs a lot of money every month to feed and clothe and provide health for the children, and dentists and everything else. And that's not possible on a limited budget. And it's not realistic to put all those people into like a 3-bedroom apartment or something. One, you would drive all the kids crazy, and 2, you drive all your neighbors crazy. So that's what I would look at, Alfredito, is if you have a family, man, you really have to take care and provide for them. That is your job and your responsibility. And also when we read in Proverbs, the Proverbs 31 woman, there's no prohibition for those who are living in the world from working and being diligent. And sometimes that work and that diligence and the blessing of God can lead somebody to acquire wealth. That's not the end of the world. I mean, you have to, but we should also focus on the realities of being generous, being kind, being merciful, taking care of the poor, right? It's not separated. Showing hospitality, something that we don't talk about enough. Showing hospitality is like amazing. It's how you build up other people and grow close to them and connect with them. All of that should be part of the life. GUI's best operating system. Father, do you have any experience with atheists? I wasn't raised religious, but I'm logically convinced God exists, Christ is God, and orthodoxy is true, but I struggle with heartfelt belief. I think about, isn't it Thomas who says something like, I believe, Lord, help me with my unbelief? So this is normal, man. It just takes time. Part of what we understand in the life of the church is that the understanding the vision of God, of seeing God and really knowing him and being connected to him and experiencing him is linked with the purity of the heart. So the heart very much has to be purified for us to know and to see God. So at the beginning, it's very normal to say that you're not fully sure or you're lacking some belief. Also, people tend to put an overemphasis on academic belief, is kind of what I understand it. Like they know things intellectually, but in their life, they're constantly fighting against whatever's happening to them or whatever's transpiring, and they don't see the providence of God. So that's where I would say, like, that's the real belief and the real life of belief is when you actually are living life and trusting in God, not knowing the outcome and what will come to pass. That's the real life of belief. So is it normal to not have a very clear vision of God when you're brand new? Absolutely. I would say continue to dive into the life of prayer. You know, God has to be God, and God will show himself in the right time. But do the things that are within your power, meaning do the life of prayer. You know, ask God for the strength to pray and put yourself into the life of prayer, the life of fasting, reading the saints, purifying your behavior with God's help. You know, in all these ways, we're very much synergistically connected with God. And the synergy is God's energy and man's energy working together. So we put forth the effort, and then like in a very tangible way, we see that God is working with us. Vemerol, thank you so much for the super chat. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Christ is risen. Indeed, he's risen. I feel a lot of power in being present, and it's hard to keep that up. Not sure if this is connected through how to emotionally fix the feeling of being misunderstood. It's a great question. You know, I mean, I think it's really a great statement. You know, in a certain way, being human is to be misunderstood. You know, people don't always get us. They don't understand our personality, our temperament, maybe even our sense of humor and a variety of other things. The reality is that it is very powerful to be present, to not be thinking about what we did yesterday or what happened in our childhood or the past, or being fearful or anxious about something that's going to happen in the future, or worrying about possibilities. All these things very much are a distraction from our life. And so, absolutely, man, it is a very real and powerful experience just to be present in life and just to be present in the present moment and not be all over the place in our thoughts. Um, I tell the story that there was a point, it was after I was ordained, and I was probably Orthodox for maybe 10 years at this point, and I was roofing in Colorado, and I was on a mall in Colorado roofing, doing commercial roofing, and I was up there, and it was just quiet, and I realized my mind was very still, very peaceful. I wasn't all over the place. You know, one of the first things that I read from the Holy Fathers when I came to the Orthodox Church was they said, you know, don't fantasize, not even in a lustful sense, but don't fantasize about anything. You know, and so often our minds are geared towards what happened, what could happen, you know, what if this happens? That's all fantasy. When they say cut all of that out. And so systematically training yourself and working through that, you start to realize like your mind becomes a lot calmer, a lot peaceful, and your disposition becomes calmer. But can we change being misunderstood? Man, if Christ was misunderstood, we cannot even begin to think that we won't be misunderstood. That's just part of life. Yeah, GUI best operating system. Great follow-up question. Also, what should I tell a priest if I visit a church? I don't want to come off as I'm not sure if I believe in God, but I want to be Orthodox. You know what, man? What I would say is just go to church. Just go and start standing in the liturgy. Just be present. Pray as you're able to and be attentive to the service. and try to block out all the thoughts that are coming at you when you're in church and just be present. It's just a piggyback on the last question, but just be present. Just give yourself time. God's not in a rush. The priest is not in a rush. I don't even make people a catechumen unless they've been coming to church for a month. And we have a full conversation beforehand that they understand why they're becoming Orthodox, why they're entering the church, what's expected of them, all those different things. But sometimes, somebody will come for a month and they're like, I don't know yet. And I go, great, no problem. Just take your time. So the priest is not in any hurry and God is not in any hurry. Just be where you're at and just be honest with God and tell him. God already knows everything, but so often, like we're afraid of telling God, and we really shouldn't be. We should be very open. We should be very open with God and disclose our thoughts to him. Yeah. Ice Wolf, thank you for the super chat. Father, I've become pretty cold and unemotional, and this possibly prevents me from having emotional connections, but I wish to get married soon and never had a relationship. What should I do? The question, the solution to all things is to figure out what is psychologically jamming us up and to deepen and build our relationship with Christ. Christ normalizes us. So if we're cold and unemotional, there's something off. It doesn't mean that we have to be angry, but we should have a certain joy in our disposition from knowing Christ. We should be alive. We should feel alive in our souls. So somebody asked me in the last super chat, well, Father, I'm pretty, what do they say? Pretty antisocial. It's like, yeah, that's not normal or healthy. So if we're unemotional or we're cold, there's something that is kind of a roadblock in our psychology, or something that's happening to us in our mind that we need to become aware of. And we need to remove that barrier, because certainly we should have love and joy and warmth towards Christ, towards the saints, towards the divine services. We should certainly be alive, and we should feel alive, and we should feel empathy and love and care and patience for other people and connection to them. That is part of being created in the image of God. So first, we always have to work on renewing our relationship with God, and then everything else follows after that. Coleman, thank you for the super chat. Father bless. I was recently able to introduce my Protestant parents to the Divine Liturgy, and they love the service, even saying they would go back. Man, glory to God. Glory to God. That's so wonderful, man. That's so wonderful. That's amazing. CJ Santiago, if Mary was sinless by God's grace, why not everyone? Doesn't Romans say all have sinned, suggesting no one is inherently free from sin? Well, I think there's two things that we have to understand, Santiago, is that one, this is not a doctrine or dogma of the Orthodox Church. It is simply, an understanding that the saints talk about, that the Mother of God did not deviate in any way from the will of God. Also, very much she made mistakes, such as when she forgot Christ. I think it was in Jerusalem, and they had to go back and find him. So this does not mean that the question in regards to Romans, when it says all have sinned, again, we don't have a dogmatic statement on the Mother of God. And number two is, this doesn't necessarily I wouldn't say one verse excludes the possibility that the Mother of God was so full of the grace from God and such a unique disposition that she erred in any way. I don't think, just because a thing says all, doesn't mean every single person that ever lived. I think there can be some nuance there, but I don't think that this is not a dogmatic issue, and that it doesn't relate to the personhood of God. Carson, thank you for the super chat. We'll wrap up the super chats and end the live stream here in a minute. Joseph asked, I'm under attack and influence of demons and dark forces. Even in sleep, they put bad dreams and thoughts on me. What can I do? That's very simple. Number one, have a priest come to your house and bless your house with holy water and read the prayers over your house. Number two, get holy water from the local church and sprinkle it on your bed before you go to sleep. It is such a simple answer, but it is absolutely true. A lot of times when people are made catechumens, that's when they have a lot of struggles with dreams, a lot of nightmares. People say that they've had the worst dreams of their life after they become catechumens. And inevitably, we do a house blessing and all the dreams stop. That's it. Trail Hiker North, thank you so much for the super chat. He says, wow, that girl, future daughter, God willing, will have 5 brothers. I want you to bring her to your channel in 20 years from now to talk about growing up with a priest dad and 5 brothers. I think the interesting thing is like, even after having 5 sons, you have a very, both being male but raising boys, because obviously there's aspects that we forget about being a boy ourselves. You very much understand a lot of their psychology and kind of like how they work, how they function, how they relate to life. And it's kind of like you got it down pat, like you understand how it is. But now having a daughter, it's like, it's almost scary. It's like having a first child again. And I have no idea even what to expect. So it's actually kind of, I would say, I don't know if intimidating is the right word, but there's certainly some measure of uncertainty. Whereas like having a boy, you very much know what you're in store for, especially if you've had 5, like all the different temperaments and personalities and whatever else aside, there's certain things that are very intrinsic to them as boys that are repeatable in each one of them. Whereas having a daughter will be a different experience. And the other thing that I wonder about, you know, I don't put a lot of thought into this, but I'm curious to find out, is like my wife is very feminine and very sweet, very gentle, very kind-hearted. But I wonder if you end up with a daughter who has 5 older brothers, if she will take after her mother and become more of the sweet, nurturing type, or in a sense, because she's raised in the environment with her brothers, if she'll become kind of more, you know, kind of, I don't want to say masculine, but more of a tomboy, more intense. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Consider this. Thank you so much for the super chat. You said homeschooling mom of 5 with another on the way. Yeah, that's what we're at. There isn't an Orthodox homeschool co-op in our area. Should we join a Catholic or Protestant co-op instead, or is it better to do without a co-op? Great question. This is something we have a lot of experience with. My experience has been that the spiritual atmosphere in the Protestant co-ops doesn't really work with my children. The observation from my sons when they went to the Protestant co-op was that they, in their own words, just did not feel like that the Protestants treated God with a lot of respect. They kind of said that they used the language like kind of Jesus Christ was their buddy, and this did not work for them. So they didn't like it. It was not a good fit for them. That's been my experience. We haven't had a Catholic co-op in our area that I know of. I don't think we've ever been to one. I don't even know if there are any in our area, so I can't comment on that. But I can certainly say that we tried this a couple times and it just didn't work. So take that for what it's worth. Maybe your kids are different ages or at a different place. But generally speaking, my experience, you know, that's what you're asking. My experience has been that you're probably better off just homeschooling them and potentially trying to start a co-op with the other Orthodox churches in the area. There was the Antiochian church in our area had a co-op, and there was a period of time, I don't know if they're still doing it, but there was a period of time the boys were a little younger and just a different place educationally, where we were doing that once a week as well. I assume at some point our own parish will continue to grow up and grow. And as we grow and have more children, I assume that we'll probably have a co-op again at some point. So if you don't have one now, pray for one and talk to the families, you know, at all of the Orthodox churches in your area and see if they want to put something together. All right, last super chat of the night, CJ Santiago. Another question: do Eucharistic miracles confirm transubstantiation? What do you make of them? I don't make anything of them. I mean, we don't. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like making the criterion of the mystical something that's scientific. So at baptism, people's sins are washed away. That's a reality. That has nothing to do with whether or not you can examine a person's soul with a microscope and see whether or not their sins are washed away. and the Holy Eucharist has tremendous power. Now, the Eucharistic quote unquote miracles in the Roman Catholic Church, I have no commentary on them. I don't read anything about Catholicism. I don't learn about it. I'm uninterested in it. I'm not saying that with any disdain. I'm just saying that's reality. Like, I don't read about Catholicism because I'm not interested in it. I don't view it as being a real church. It doesn't have apostolic succession. It doesn't have the sacraments. I put no weight into this at all whatsoever. I think it's very bizarre that they have these kind of quote unquote Eucharistic miracles on display. That they have this kind of what I view as being a very strange, like, I don't know, veneration. It's not, it's the way that they do it that seems very strange. I mean, we always have the reserved sacraments on the tabernacle. So there's on the altar, there's a tabernacle, which is kind of like a church made out of metal, and on it has a box. Inside of the box has the reserved sacraments. Those reserved sacraments are for those who are sick and you need to take them Holy Communion. You make them every year at Pascha and you distribute them throughout the year to sick people. The question is, do we ever take that out and carry that around during processions or have people bow down to it or whatever? No, we don't do any of that stuff. So again, the stuff in Catholicism, it just doesn't make any sense to me. It's not part of the Orthodox Church or Orthodox tradition. The idea of taking the Eucharist and putting it in a glass case and holding it up and parading it around, very bizarre, like doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. It's very foreign to the tradition of the Orthodox Church. So I don't even have any I don't have any commentary on it whatsoever. And I think it debases, again, like what I said, it debases the mystery of the sacrament. It's like it's an overemphasis on science validating the life in the church. I don't see that there's any value in that whatsoever. All right, last question. Eric, thank you so much for the super chat. You said, Father, did you see that Rep. Joe from South Carolina, I think, is persecuting ROCOR and even OCA on supporting Russian influence in USA? I did. I mean, I think I commented on earlier in the chat. Again, it's so ridiculous. This idea, you have a bunch of just working class priests who happen to be in ROCOR, a lot of working priests in the OCA, and the idea that somehow these people are receiving money from overseas is absolutely absurd. I mean, there's no evidence to this whatsoever. I mean, it's just absurd. Then the idea that it's like Russian influence. How? Like, because we have borscht at lunch or we serve the Divine Liturgy? The Divine Liturgy is from St. John Chrysostom. Because we followed like the Russian traditional spiritual practices, that's somehow subversive. Lord have mercy. He's like taking what the medicine of the church is and turning it into saying that it's something that it would be subversive for American culture. The church, American culture needs the Orthodox Church if it's going to survive. That's my thoughts on it. This whole thing is so patently false and absurd and absolutely has nothing to do with reality or anything verifiable that I just saw that and I just thought that's ridiculous. It doesn't even make any sense. It's so patently false and absurd. But whatever. It is what it is. All right, y'all. Thanks for tuning in tonight. God willing, we'll do this again next Wednesday night. God bless you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the super chats. I pray that you have a wonderful Thanksgiving and have some wonderful time with your families. And don't say anything crazy at Thanksgiving to make people upset about orthodoxy. If somebody wants to talk about it, talk about it. Don't go on a rant. Don't try to proselytize your family. Attract people to the church by your changed life, your good behavior, your love, your peace, your composure, the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Don't try to argue people into the church. It's fruitless. And don't ruin other people's Thanksgiving by getting on a pedestal and ranting about it. Lord have mercy. Have a great night.